We are really happy to have you here. As you may know, this topic, PPP loan forgiveness, is hands down one of our most popular topics. These webinars are hosted specifically for BBB accredited businesses. Those are businesses who've taken an oath to uphold BBB's standards of trust, to be responsive, to act with integrity, and to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We also record these webinars and post them so you can watch them at a later date and so you can share with colleagues and others you might think may benefit from them. We'll be posting the links to our YouTube channel in the chat box so you can find this and other webinars designed to guide and support you. Today, we're excited to have SBA Outreach and Marketing Specialist Cynthia Yamasaki here to share key information you'll need to prepare and submit the PPP Forgiveness 3508 Easy application. Cynthia has over 3 decades of business experience working in a variety of leadership roles in the corporate and nonprofit sectors. Cynthia has a multifaceted background as a small business owner and as the founding director of the Patsy T. Mink Center for Business and Leadership, where she established new small business curriculum. She has held senior management roles in human resources, leadership development, finance, and banking. Cynthia is a well-known business coach and advocate, roles that have earned her numerous accolades and awards in the community. Before we get started, I want to remind you that we will open the latter part of the session so Cynthia can field your questions. In the past, as I mentioned before, this topic has really generated a great number of questions, which is why we have turned on the upvote feature of this webinar. Here's what that means. When you select the Q&A box located at the bottom of your viewing screen, a window will pop up to allow you to type your question in. In addition, you'll also be able to scroll through the other questions from other attendees, and you have the option to like the ones that are most relevant to you. When we kick off the Q&A, we will start with the questions that have the most upvotes. With that, I will turn it over to you, Cynthia.
Aloha, everyone. It's so nice to be with so many of you from across the Pacific and in Hawaii. It's a rainy day, and I think everyone is feeling a little anxious with what's happening with COVID, PPP, IDLE, all these different alphabet soups. So what I'd like to do is just start by everyone taking a deep breath and just being really present. And I'll try my best to share with you from a small business owner perspective of how can we get a little understanding of what this all means to get ready to apply for the PPP forgiveness. And keep in mind that this is all changing. Just like small business owners and entrepreneurs, we are out there to solve a problem or serve a value to our customers, and we're in the moment. So this program is just that. When COVID happened, the government said we need to find a way to help small businesses, and this program has been evolving. So please know that in this webinar, I'll be sharing with you information as we know it as of August 4th and today. And if anything changes, I'll give you some information about where you can get it. Keep up to date. So let me share my screen and you will go and get started. And while we're waiting for it to load up, there is a little delay. I'm going to stop my video and see if that helps. Okay, I'm not able to see the chat room or anything, but if Jason or Jamie could just give me a little affirmation that everything is okay, that you can see the slides.
We can. I see everything. Thank you so much, and you sound great.
Okay, thank you. So today, we are talking about getting prepared. And originally, we talked about just doing the easy form, but with the changes as it's happened since I discussed this with Jason, I thought it would be good to add a little bit of information about the 3508 form, not in great detail. So those of you who find that you're not able to use the form, at least you have some information. Before I get started, let me just give some background on the SBA. We were founded in 1953 as an independent agency, and pretty much to help small businesses and entrepreneurs to succeed, grow, and strengthen the overall economy. And we also have programs to help in times of disasters like now. In 3 different ways, we provide counseling through our SBA partners, capital through our SBA lenders, and contracting with the federal government. Today, I know that some of you sent in questions, and there seemed to be a little confusion between PPP and EIDL. So I'm going to just clarify that. There are 2 programs that were offered through the SBA. One was the PPP loan. So that is the Paycheck Protection Program. And the intention was to help businesses to keep their employees on payroll during an interim period. And at first it was for 8 weeks. And then in June, we found that, hey, this COVID is still happening. So it was extended to 24 weeks. And then there was also a direct disaster loan. And those loans businesses would apply and receive the loans directly through their lender, the business lender, which could have been a bank or a fintech or online bank, or some credit unions were also accredited to issue PPP loans. The other program was called EIDL loan, and that was a economic injury disaster loan that small businesses would apply directly with the Treasury through a portal. So that loan comes from the SBA. The other is from your bank. Today's session talks about the loan, the PPP loan that you received from your bank. We are going to cover the overall process, who can use the easy form, 3508 easy form, some of the overviews of the forgiveness criteria and safe harbor, looking at the form, highlighting the key points to remember, and the key points for the information and the backup documents that you need to prepare, some of it to submit with your application form, and other documentation that you should retain. And again, if you have questions, we will be taking that in the chat box and leave some time to answer them. So let's go over the overview of the process. First, you can apply for the forgiveness once you used all of your loan funds at the end of the 8-week or 24-week period, covered period. The next step would be to get all the instructions, and I'll give you some links on that. Gather your payroll information and non-payroll expenses and employee information. You can put that information together and submit it with your PPP loan forgiveness application. And you have until 10 months from the end of your covered period. The SBA form, there are 2. There's the 3508 easy form, which we'll cover today, the 3508 form, and then the equivalent lenders form. So I think what is important today is just to focus on the information that's needed and not so much the nuances of the form, because most borrowers will be working directly with their bank, and the banks are, majority of them are having online application formats. So, and many that we've talked to had indicated to us that they will be contacting you when they're ready to start taking in your application forms. So I congratulate all of you now for taking the time to listen to this webinar to get prepared. So you're ahead of the game so far. So once you submit your application for forgiveness to their lender, the lender has 60 days to review it, make sure everything is in order, and submit it to the SBA. Once the SBA receives it, they have 90 days to review the application and inform the lender whether the loan is fully forgiven, partially forgiven, or doesn't qualify for forgiveness. Now, if the loan is partially forgiven or is not forgiven, then the lender will inform all borrowers of their status. And if a portion of it or all of it is not eligible to be forgiven, your loan will become, the loan will initiate as of the date that you receive the funds at a rate of 1%. And the term of your loan can be 2 years or 5 years. And that depends on the date that you received your PPP loan. If you received it before June 5th, it is a 2-year note. And after June 5th, it's a 5-year note. The borrowers who received the PPP before June 5th has the option to go back to their lender and see if there can be a modification of the loan term. But right now, it's the June 5th date is a determination of whether or not it's a 2-year or 5-year loan. I'm not sure, the SBA forms are available to download and information. There's also some FAQs that were published on this website. And don't worry, I'll show you how you can look at it, but it's on the Treasury website. So the two forms are the 3508 or the 3508 Easy. There are 2 different documents, one with instructions and one the actual application form. The other acceptable way to submit for forgiveness is using your lender's application.
And Cynthia, I hate to interrupt you. Do you mind seeing if you can select that hide button on your screen where it says stop sharing and hide? Oh,
Okay, yes. Thank you for doing that. So I'm going to now cover who can use the Easy form. And there are 3 situations. It is for businesses or borrowers who are either self-employed, an independent contractor, or a sole proprietor is the first situation. A small business with no employees. The second situation is when the borrower is a small business that has employees, but they follow under these 2 conditions. Their annual salaries or the hourly wages of any employee was not reduced by more than 25%. And the number of employees or the average paid hours of the employees between January 1st and the end of the cover period was not reduced, and except for some safe harbor, which I will go into more. The third situation is when a small business has employees and they did not reduce the salaries or hourly wages more than 25% during their covered period or their alternate covered period, which I'll explain in a bit. And they were unable to operate at the same level of activity before COVID happened, or the date is February 15th, due to health and safety compliance and requirements by the government. Now, I want you to take note here that according to all of the documents that are posted on the Treasury and what we call the interim, or the rules, I won't bore you with more acronyms, but the rules, it states specifically it's when the business is closed by the government as defined by the Health and Human Services, the CDC, and OSHA. Now, I believe there's been a lot of questions from everyone whether or not local state and county requirements is also included. So right now that's being clarified, but I'm just sharing with you what's published as of this date. Okay. So I mentioned safe harbor. So in situation number 2, where they had employees and you could qualify for forgiveness if you kept your head count, where there's some situations that you can still qualify for forgiveness. And that is if the employee that was on board as of February 15th is no longer working for you, and you try to hire someone or hire a qualified staff for any of the unfulfilled positions before the end of this year. Or if you had furloughed some employees, or they reduced their hours, and then when you offered for them to come back to work and they refused to come back to work, then that's a safe harbor that you can still qualify for forgiveness when you did your best effort to retain your original employees. There's some other points that you want to make sure that you are aware of. That is the costs and the things that were the payroll costs and non-payroll costs that are covered under this loan that you wanted to be forgiven has to pertain to your operations as before February 15th. It's not intended for anything new, like if you were to buy a new car, a vehicle or something for your business with this loan. It's really to protect the payroll. That's the intention. So you should have been in business prior to February 15th. Doesn't apply for any new businesses after that. It's for payroll for employees who reside in the United States. And the covered period can be for 8 weeks or 24 weeks from the date that your loan has been dispersed. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it depended on when you got your loan. If it was prior to June 5th, it was 8 weeks. And after that, it was 24 weeks. But people could go back and still, if you received your loan earlier than June 5th, you still have the option to use it over 24 weeks. When you see the term alternative payroll covered period, that means it would be a date that you can select to start on the first day of the pay period following your loan disbursement date. For example, if you received your loan funds on June 1st, but your payroll period doesn't start until June 8th, then you can say my covered period is from June 8th for the next 24 weeks. Okay. And as I mentioned earlier, you apply for the forgiveness when all of your funds are used or within the 10 months from the end of your covered period. Now, you don't have to wait 10 months. Many people ask the question, do I have to, if I'm on a 24-week pay period, covered period, and I used all the funds before the end of the 24 weeks, do I have to wait? The answer is no. You can submit for forgiveness prior to the end of your covered period. Now, the key criteria to qualify for forgiveness is using 60%, at least 60% of the funds for payroll during your covered period, and a maximum of 40% of your loan funds for non-payroll costs. Now, some of you who may have applied for the loan prior to June 5th, prior to the change, it was 75% and 25%. So no matter when you applied for your loan, the criteria for forgiveness is now 60-40. And the 60% of payroll costs includes your employee gross salary, wages, tips, commissions, paid leaves, and benefits. I have more information in the following slides. The 40% of non-payroll costs that can be included, used for your loan funds and forgiven, is business mortgage interest, not the principal or any prepayment, but just business mortgage interest, business rent or lease payments, and business utility payments. And please note that these are for costs that occur during your covered period, but should have been in service prior to February 15th. There is also a cap, a cash compensation cap for owners and employees who are paid over $100,000 per year in salaries and total comp. And I have more information on that coming forth. So for this cash compensation caps, the maximum cash compensation for employees who earn over $100,000 under 8-week covered period, it's $15,385. If you have a 24-week covered period, then it's $46,154. So really, it's an equivalent of taking the $100,000 maximum divided by 52 weeks and multiplied by either 8 weeks or 24 weeks. Now, it's a little different for owners. The maximum for owners is $15,385, and for the owner, like self-employed or independent contractor, for 24 weeks, it would be $20,833, or whatever is on your Schedule C, line 41 for the 2019 tax returns. So like 2.5 times the monthly average, whichever is less. The gray chart below explains further what is forgivable under compensation. For gross salary, wages, tips, commission, bonuses, hazard pay, for etc., and even the payroll taxes. For an employee, it is forgivable, limited to the cap. Same for owners and partners. For group health care insurance premium, only the portion that the employer pays is forgivable. And if for owner partners, it depends on the type of business, their legal status. The same for retirement contributions. So in other words, if an employer pays for employees' insurance premiums and retirement contribution, only the employer's portion of it is forgivable, not what the employee puts into their funds or pays for their premiums. And for the owner and the partner, it depends on the type of their business structure, which I'll explain next. So again, we talked about the caps, but here's where it makes a difference in your legal entity. If you're a C corporation, the owners are considered to be employees of the company and they are on payroll. So the employee cash contributions, retirement, health insurance that is paid by the employer or the borrower, the company, is allowed as forgivable up to the cap. For S corporations, and this applies especially for anyone who has more than 2% or more ownership, including the family members, the forgivable payroll compensation includes cash and retirement, but it does not include any health insurance premiums, because for S corporations, it's already considered as part of its total comp. For general partners, that's defined as having 20% or more ownership in the company. It would be 2.5 times the monthly average of the 2019 self-employment net earnings, or based on Schedule K1. And for self-employed, it's 2.5 times the monthly average of the 2019 self-employment taxable income, which is reflected on the IRS 1040 Schedule C form, Schedule C or Schedule F on line 31. I just wanted to check, Jamie, any questions popped up on that? I just want to do a little check there.
You know, Cynthia, we have so many questions coming in. It could very likely be that we do have to
Okay.
scroll through. We may just
Okay.
turn around at the end and try to hit those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, for the forgivable non-payroll expenses, there was some information that was published just the other day, the FAQs. Now, keep in mind that when this FAQ came out, it doesn't supersede any other provisions unless it's stated there. So this is just providing additional information. So for non-payroll expenses, the total of it for the covered period must be 40% or less. What is included for business mortgage insurance is the interest on the business mortgages on real or personal property, such as an auto loan, that was made before February 15th. And if that mortgage was refinanced during the covered period for the same asset, it is still eligible for forgiveness. For business rent or lease payments, it is covered during this period if the lease was in place prior to February 15th or renewed for the same location, the same space. For utility payments, these are the items that can be considered as forgivable: the electricity, gas for the business vehicles, internet access, telephone costs. Transportation utility fees that are assessed by the federal government, and both the electricity supply and distribution charges, including GET. For interest on unsecured debt, business debt, it is not part of the amount that can be forgiven for the PPP loan. So if you included it when you calculated your costs to apply for the loan, you may have received it, but it's not eligible to be forgiven. I'm sure questions will pop up about that. Okay. Okay, so let's just go over the easy form. I'm not going to cover the regular form, but I do, this was originally intended for those who would qualify to use this form. It's pretty straightforward what you would need to fill in the blanks. What I wanted to highlight is to remind you to please make sure that the information that you provide on your forgiveness application matches with all the information that you provided on your PPP loan application and your loan documentation that you received from the lenders. So that's very critical so that all your records can be retrieved and matched for the same legal entity and loan numbers. And then there's also the question here about EIDL loans. So that was if you received an EIDL loan directly from the SBA, it just asks you the question whether or not you got an advance and if you had the application. And if you did get an EIDL loan, what is the application number? Now, I just put in there $1,000 as an example, but the advance for those who were able to apply for the loan and receive it before the advance funds were expired or used up, it was up to $10,000. So there was a grant or an advance amount of $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. Okay. So the forgiveness form is really 2 pages. The one I just showed you is a top half. The bottom half of the easy form is the forgiveness amount calculation that you would input. And what I'm going to do next in the following screens is to explain to you the 3 different situations. So the first situation, if you can remember, was in the case of a self-employed independent contractor, or sole proprietor. So basically, for that situation, majority of the applicants used their Schedule C, their 2019 tax return, looked at line 31, and in this example, it says $60,000 was the taxable self-employment income, 60,000. So when that 2.5 times of 60,000 would be the monthly average was $12,500 in this example. So that was the payroll cost. And pretty much lines 2, 3, and 4, I have it blank here, but you may want to just put zeros in there just to make sure that you don't leave any blank lines. And then you would carry down the 12,500 to line 5. You would, on line 6, enter the amount that you got for your loan. In this example was 12,500. For line 7, it says you can disregard that, but it says to make sure that you meet the 60%, there's a calculation there. But in this example, everything, 100% of the PPP loan was related to your self-employment income. So that's carried down. And so in this case, it shows that this particular example, the self-employed business owner has the line 8, the forgivable amount is 12,500. Just going to pause so you can digest that. Okay. The next example is related to the business owner that had employees and some changes in the staffing during the covered period, and had to furlough or someone left the company. So how does it work for that situation? I'm going to use some assumptions. The assumptions are this particular borrower had an 8-week covered period and the employees were paid weekly. Now, in this situation, in weeks 2 and 3, business slowed down, so they reduced the hours and the salary in weeks 2 and 3. One employee resigned. However, a replacement was hired and retained during the covered period. And the owner paid themselves a cap of $15,385. So here in this, now you don't have to do this this is an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to do it this way, but I just thought it would be easier to illustrate it to you. So in this case, it lists on the top half of the grid, I wish I could use my pointer, but the hours and each position, the bottom half, the salary for each position. So that's on the far left column there. And on the rows on the top going vertically, you can see what they were working at, the number of hours they worked at, and the weekly salary or wages. And then during the covered periods 1 through 8, what was each person paid and the number of hours that they worked. So here you can see the part-time, in this case, the manager and the full-time staff had hours reduced. And the part-time staff, one person left, and the owner worked more hours. The annual salaries were broken out here, and by the changes in the week. And it just found that this kind of spreadsheet helps to track the activity in it, and they resigned in week 3. But here, where you would pay attention to is the column that says total, average, and employed at your very far right, last 3 columns. So you can see here the calculations that for the number of hours and whether or not these positions stayed filled, the answer was yes. And the amount of earnings during the covered period is calculated there along with the average. Now there's a little further to the right, you can see that the manager's salary was reduced by 8%, the average salary, compared from the pre-COVID to the end of the covered period. And the full-time employee, there was a change of negative 9%. It went down 9%. But for the part-time individual, the hourly wage stayed the same. Okay, so that, take a look there, circled the $28,979 was the total payroll cost for this borrower for the covered period. So they would take that number and on the easy form application, put it on line 1, total payroll costs. And then input any of the loan proceeds that they used for business loan mortgage goes on line 2, rent or lease payments on line 3, utility on line 4. Line 5 is the total of lines 1 through 4. And line 6 is where you would input what the original loan amount was, $48,000. Now, line 7 is a calculation where you take the $28,979 on line 1, total payroll costs, and divide it by 0.60. So that's just a quick test to make sure that at least 60% of the yeah, okay, yeah, 60% was used for payroll. So then on line 8, the instructions there is to look at lines 5, 6, and 7, and you would write in or fill in the lowest amount of those 3 lines. So we have 700 people, and I usually ask the question to type in, make sure you're still awake, that what is the answer? But because we have such a wonderful wide audience, the answer is 48,000. So that means that the loan has been fully forgiven, right? The loan amount was 48,000. Line 8 is 48,000. The loan is forgiven. Now let's go to example number 3. Now this was the borrower who had to reduce their operations because of stay-at-home orders by the government. So in this example, some of the assumptions we use is that it was a restaurant that reduced its services because it went from in-service and then to takeout within the government guidelines. They elected the 24-week covered period, and the employees were paid on the 15th and 30th of every month, so twice a month. Now, one employee was furloughed for 6 weeks or 3 pay periods and did return to work. So again, this is just for illustration purposes only. It lists like the hours worked for those positions and the salaries paid for those positions pre-COVID and over 12 pay periods. And 12 because they pay, it's 24 weeks and they were paid twice a month, right? So 12 pay periods. So the yellow highlighted part of this illustration just shows you where the changes happened. And to summarize it, just on the bottom half of this screen, you'll see just a comparison of pre-COVID and the end of the covered period. The 3 positions, they were all still filled at the end of the covered period, and the salaries, there was a calculation before the period, the average salary before COVID and during the covered period. For the manager, there was no change, but for the person who was furloughed, there was a change, a reduction of 25%. So earlier I said that the requirement is that you can qualify for forgiveness if you didn't reduce your hours or your average salaries by 25%. So again, the question is, so does this borrower qualify for forgiveness? And someone, I'm just going to imagine, someone answered it correctly by saying, maybe, we're not sure yet. That's the right answer, because we also have to make sure that it follows within the 60/40 requirement. And in this case, the total payroll cost was $37,743. But look at line 2, 3, and 4. These are just numbers that I just use as an example. The total non-payroll cost came out to be $32,000. And the loan amount was $69,000. So in other words, the payroll cost only amounted to be about 55%. The non-payroll was 46%. So it did not meet the 60/40 criteria. So what does that mean? So by continuing with this form, line 5 is the sum of the first 4 lines. The loan amount was that. The payroll cost is line number 1 divided by 0.62 by 60, and the amount there. The line 8 is the smallest of 5, 6, and 7, which is $62,905. So you can see here that the original loan amount was $69,000, but the forgiveness amount is roughly $62,905. What does that mean? So the loan was $69,000. The forgiveness amount is $62,905. The difference is what remains as the PPP loan, $6,095. If this borrower received the loan before June 5th, it would be a 2-year loan at 1%. And after June 5th, it could be a 5-year loan at 1%. Now, the borrower could also, if they received it before June 5th, like in this case, elected to for a 5-year loan, right? And payments can be deferred for 6 months. So for the loan, the interest will accrue from the time the loan was disbursed, or the PPP loan amount, but the payment was deferred for 6 months. Okay, and pause for a little bit so you can all digest that. Now remember on the application form, the top half, there was a question or the blank about completing if you received in advance. Now I know that one of the questions came up prior to this webinar. Someone said, you know, I got $2,000 in my bank account. I don't know what that's for. That was probably for if that wasn't related to your PPP loan, like you didn't sit down with your lender and sign the loan documents and get the loan proceeds, if it just popped up in your checking account, your business checking account or whatever, it could be that you applied online for the EIDL loan and you received an advance. So at one time, they were trying to process so many applications coming in. They said people need help, and so they were just in good faith going ahead and doing the loan advance. So there are questions that we are waiting for answers. If you receive the advance, some people or some media or it got mentioned as a grant, but it's a loan advance. So the question is, if you received a PPP loan and you received an EIDL advance, how does that affect the loan forgiveness or your PPP loan? And there's discussion on that, and it will be clarified. In other words, at this moment, I don't have a direct answer, and we will have to stay tuned. Okay.
Cynthia, I just wanted to chime in really quickly. We're at about 10
Yes.
to the hour. I know
Okay.
that you have a lot of ground to cover. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time and see if you do have a little bit of wiggle room to go over and see what we can do to get just a few of the questions answered. So just wanted to give you a little heads up.
Yes, I'd be happy to stay on to answer some questions. And yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next slide is the second page of the forgiveness form. Key point, read everything. I'm not going to cover it now, but just make sure that the top 2/3, you read it carefully, and you must initial all the blanks, all the little blanks there. When you get to the bottom third of the form, you just check one of them and sign it and print your name. Okay. So if your lender does not have an online submission process, or if they will accept paper forms, if you completed the easy form, the page 1, and then complete this signature, there's some documents you need to also have ready to submit, and it's on this page of the instructions. It pretty much is to substantiate the changes in your payroll, your receipts of your expenses, and documentation of changes in your employees. So read this carefully, what to submit, and if and your banker will also work with you. So as I mentioned, the documentation that you want to make sure is to have everything for that covered period in detail about the payroll, taxes, your benefits that you paid, receipts for the allowable non-payroll or canceled checks for the non-payroll costs. If you had any changes in your staff, have everything in writing. If you made a job offer, if the person refused, or if your current employee refuses to come back to work, if there was any terminations for cause, involuntary resignations, anything that happened during that covered period, I would say it would be better to have more information than not enough, and in writing. And then again, because the question needs to be clarified, whether it's just the federal government or also state and county local shutdown, or health regulations that affected the ability for businesses to operate at full level, have that information. Collect that as well, just in case, because you're going to need it for 6 years. You don't have to submit all of this information, but it's good to have it as for your own records. I know we are running out of time, but all I want to say about this, and I won't go into detail, the difference between the easy form and the other form that was revised in June, there's an additional schedule that you need to prepare to substantiate your payroll costs, non-payroll costs, and your full-time equivalent headcount. And there's tables 1 and tables 2, and the average full-time equivalency. Later in the Q&A, if someone wants more to elaborate if you'd like me to elaborate more on this, I will. Okay, sorry everyone. Okay, so 3 key points to take away. Prepare for your application. Please download the instructions. Keep posted to the websites for the most current versions. When you're ready to submit for your forgiveness, contact your lender. It's going to be processed by your lender that you received your loan from. There may have been some lenders that sold their loan to a servicer. If that happened, you should have received communication. It would be the lender who is servicing your loan. Okay, and then check the U.S. government, the Treasury, and the SBA websites. And I'll show you an example for the Treasury website. If you go to treasury.gov, you see this red bar. When you click on that red bar, you would then click on the box that says Assistance for Small Business, which then will lead you to this screen with all the information related to PPP loans for borrowers as well as for lenders. And if you were to scroll down further on this screen, you'll see program rules and frequently asked questions. If it's still confusing, I know that many of you are not from Hawaii, but for the Hawaii participants, we have resource partners that does free counseling, can meet with you, answer your questions, and this is how you can contact them. And these centers are located, these are also nationwide. So these are SBA partners. In Hawaii, there's a Small Business Development Center with offices on all major islands. There's a Women's Business Center on Oahu. there is a Veterans Business Outreach Center, also SCORE. So these, the SBDC, Women's Business Centers, Veterans, VBOC as we affectionately call them, and SCORE are available in all, within the United States and its territories. So I have the information there for our Hawaii office, but if you want to know and get information of your local area, if you go to sba.gov and click on local assistance, it'll prompt you to put in your address or your city, and you'll see all the different SBDCs, all the different SBA partners that are available to answer your questions and work with you. Many of them are closed because of COVID, but they're doing virtual appointments that you can share your unique situation and they can help you. But also you can also go to your lender, your bankers, because they are becoming very familiar with the forgiveness process as well. Okay, so I'm just showing you the SBA, the Hawaii's website, just to close it, to show you all the different things that we do with SBA. And in Hawaii, you can contact me or my partner, a colleague, Mary Dale, and we'll be happy to assist you. So, okay, we're ready for Q&A.
Wow, Cynthia, thank you so much. I know, and as I've mentioned before, we are so grateful that you have given your time and expertise to the hundreds of attendees that we have today. We know that this information is evolving all of the time. I will tell you too that we have 74 questions in the queue right now. I also know that we received an onslaught of questions prior to. So as I mentioned before, if the attendees can take a look at the questions that are in the queue now, upvote the ones that are most relevant to you. We'll start from the top and work our way down. In addition, if you go toggle from the Q&A box, which is where the questions are, if you look in the chat section, we have a landing page dedicated to our Building Trust in Trying Times campaign and our commitment to be able to serve and assist businesses who are aligned with BBB. If you go to trust-bbb.org, we have resources there, including a link to an FAQs page specifically revolving around the PPP and EIDL loans. We will take the questions we cannot answer and see if we can get those answers for you in short order from Cynthia and some of our other experts to be able to feature them on those pages. So with that, Cynthia, I do know too, some of these may be things that you have touched on already, but because they have received many upvotes, it looks like we want to be able to revisit those and be very clear. So number one, what exactly qualifies as a full-time employee? How do we factor an employee? Oh, it just went away. Oh, there we go. How do we factor an employee that varies from 20 to 40 hours per week?
Okay, so it's going to say the definition for a full-time employee is 40 hours per week. So it might take, you probably take over the covered period, the average. And if it isn't, there's another different type of calculation. And this is more, you would have to break it out and not use the easy form. You would have to use the 3508 form and chart it out. And that's where you list, all your employees and then a calculation of whether it comes out to a full-time equivalency. But the definition is full-time employee is 40 hours per week.
Okay.
So you might, for that one employee, 1 week might be 40, the next be 20, and at the end of the covered period, you'll have an average.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Yeah, okay.
James asks, I originally had an 8-week period with my bank. However, I was not able to spend all the funds in 8 weeks. Can I just go to 24 weeks? And if so, do I need to tell the bank or make any written changes to extend it for the 24-week period?
Yes, please go back to your bank because you would have to make sure that your loan documents, your note, and any things that you've signed reflects the correct, just let them know. Make sure, it's better to communicate.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, Terry asks, do payroll taxes count as payroll expenses?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Those are nice answers. Okay, Trish asks, how do I know what my covered period is?
You would have elected it. So you had a choice of 8 weeks or 24 weeks. So it's from the time you received your loan and either 8 weeks out before or 24 weeks out from there.
So the day one of receiving that loan marks your first day.
Correct. And then you can also, if your payroll periods don't start on the same day as when you received your loan, that's called the alternative covered period.
Great.
I think I used the example like if you got your loan on June 1st, but your payroll period doesn't start until like June 7th or 8th, that would be your start.
Great, thank you. Alyssa asks, are there specific considerations for PPP forgiveness for solo business owners who applied and received PPP funds only to cover their income rather than staff payroll costs? Do you want me to ask that one more time?
Well, then, so you're an employer that hires employees, but the amount that you submitted was based on only your salary and not your employees' salaries. Is that the situation?
Are there specific considerations for PPP forgiveness for solo business owners who applied and received PPP funds only to cover their income?
So if you're a sole proprietor, right? If you're the only person for your business, it is only for your income. Yes.
Okay.
If you had an independent contractor, if you hired someone to help you and they're not on your payroll, then that's not forgiven. So it is that first example where I show sole proprietor, independent contractor, or self-employed, where it's just based on your loan amount, really, right? Because that's your net taxable employment income.
Perfect. And just as a reminder, we will have this session on our YouTube channel. You can find that link in the chat box. In addition, we'll also link to that from our trust-bbb.org webpage, and we'll make sure that we are able to get the documents to you that were shared prior to registration. So hopefully those will be good resources where you can go back. I realize this is complicated. Okay, do you want to do a few more questions, Cynthia?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, Renee asks, are cell phone plans considered a utility payment?
If you had your cell phone in place prior to February 15th, yes. If it's under your business name. But if you're a sole proprietor, sometimes it's under your own name. But if you can show that you use it for your business and it's not a new cell phone, yes.
Great, thank you.
I mean, new cell phone plan. Sorry, I need to distinguish that.
Thank you so much. Keisha asks, I have a question about situation 2 and 3. What if the employee's total wages earned during that period were reduced in hours due to the inability, hold on, my screen just went down here. Due to the inability of the business being able to operate at the same level of business activity as before?
And they were restricted by government, as long as it wasn't more than 25% reduction. And if they can show it was because of government orders that you could not operate at the same level or had to close, then it's safe harbor. That's safe harbor.
Thank you.
Areas. Yeah.
Sharon asks, I'm a sole proprietor set up as an LLC, taxed as an S Corp. I am the only employee. Can I use the easy form?
Most likely, yes.
Okay. Susan asks, can you define transportation costs? You've indicated gas for business vehicles, but what about other transportation costs?
It's related to your business vehicle. And there could be some, like in your normal business, if you have like delivery vehicles or things like that. As long it has to be like costs that are related to operating your business during that covered period.
Okay.
So that is still, so what I shared with you is what is on the form. And yes, there are a lot of questions for more details. And if you were to, if you want to, you can have them, your records ready to show. But I'm just sharing with you what is conveyed in the actual instructions.
Okay, so
Yeah.
business vehicles.
Right.
Okay, excellent. Thank
That you use for your business. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Debbie asks, can you collect PUA during the
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit there.
Debbie asks, can you collect PUA during the covered period?
Oh, the PUA? You mean for the self-employment for the Hawaii version? You cannot collect for the same period in time. So you can't, like, if you're for the same covered period, in other words, can't double dip. In fact, PUA probably requires to see if you received any other funds as well. Right. So say you had, like, this has been going on for what, 6 months? I don't know. I've lost track of time. It's been so long. But say you had an 8-week covered period PPP loan and it's finished. And then you apply for PUA, which then covers you. Then possibly yes. But if it's for the same period of time, then possibly no. But that's a good question.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarity.
Mm-hmm.
We are at 3:10. We're going to ask, we still have several questions, but some of them have several upvotes. So if we can do maybe another 5 minutes, is that okay with you, Cynthia? I want to be careful of your time.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We really appreciate this. Anne asks, I am a single employer owner of my S Corp. I qualify for Easy Form, yes? So this is...
Yes.
Okay, going back to that other question. Thank you. James asks, I'm a little bit fuzzy on the 8-week and 24-week stuff. Do you get to choose? Does it depend on when you received the loan?
Yes. So before June 5th, it was 8 weeks. And then they passed another act to extend it. So it was 24 weeks. So if you originally got an 8-week, you can go back to your lender and say, I want to use it. You can extend it to 24 weeks. After June 5th, it would have been 24 weeks.
Great.
So the date that you got your PPP loan. Mm-hmm.
Nanette asks, if you have other business costs like a billing system, payroll system, or other expenses like paper, can this be part of the 40% costs?
If you have other payroll costs to do your payroll?
If you have other business costs like a billing system, payroll system, or other expenses like paper, can this be part of the 40% costs?
It's very specific on the form, what I showed you, and those were not listed, but it's possible. I think, what I'd like to do is get a list of all the questions and I'll field through them. Others, and then if there's the ones that's kind of the gray area, then I will follow up to see and get if we can get better answers, more definitive answers.
Cynthia, that would be wonderful. And as I mentioned, we do have an FAQs page, so we can load those there so people can go back and access those at any time and be able to help their colleagues out as well. Thank you. Okay, we have Anne asks, what about a utility used for business in my personal name, but paid from business?
So if you, in your business, regularly in your tax returns, claimed it as your business expense, and if you use, your 2019 tax returns when you applied for the loan to show that that's your expense and the reason how you came up with your loan amount, then it could be forgiven. So everything has to match right from the time you applied and what you actually use in your business. Right. So if your accountant or whoever prepared your tax return said, okay, This, you only use it for your business. That. What's tricky is you work out of your home. And some people can say, okay, I definitely use this room for my business, right? So it's just like thinking about your tax return, what is deductible expenses or not. And how do you, unless you have a separate electricity line or telephone line for your business, hard to say, oh yeah, my meter is covering my whole house.
Right.
Yeah, so if you kind of like from a viewpoint of what is the intention? The intention was really to help cover payroll costs. And if you're a sole proprietor, your net income is your salary, right? And all those costs were included. That's why in my first example, it was just that, very simple. But when you get into employees and trying to discern 60% and 40%, I would say make sure you have all your payroll costs covered, exceed that 60%, right? Because and then try as best possible to fall into the categories that they outlined. But then there's some that's, depending on the nature of your business, is considered to be operating costs. So it could be considered. So that's we'll check kind of answer.
Thank you. And we're going to do two more, I think, here before we take these offline. Wendy asks, do we include S Corp owners' health insurance in cash comp when doing the calculation?
You're going to have to lay it all out. So in my examples today, I did not itemize the expenses portion. I only, the non-payroll, I only did it for payroll because I wanted to emphasize that for the easy form. But you'll see that you'll have to itemize it and show. And then depending on your type of business, what is forgivable. So it's not whether or not yeah. That makes sense? Was that a fuzzy answer?
I wish I was enough to be able to understand merely your conduct.
Yeah. If you haven't already, and if you go to the Treasury website, the instructions are pretty straightforward. And it answers a lot of, I think it would answer a lot of the questions that people have. If you're not sure about, look at both the easy form and the 35808 forms in terms of the instructions, because the instructions details what is allowed in those categories and what is required for documentation. Okay. So I know that, everyone is kind of marinating on this, and I wish I could be more direct, but as we are, the answers are always, it depends, because we're unique beings and our businesses are unique. But taxes, death, and COVID is something that is happening. Sorry, I don't mean to make light of it, but it's trying times. I understand.
No, and we know that you're not making light of it at all. And all of the information that you're providing is so valuable, and we're so grateful. So we'll do one more question before we wrap it up here. Let's see. On the application, where it asks for number of employees, is that a head count or is it a full-time employee?
On the application, when it asks for head count, I think it asks for your head count. On the application for forgiveness, yes, it asks for.
I think
so in the
forgiveness.
Yeah, for the 3508, there's a distinction and telling an explanation, and I didn't go into that to detail because it's the 3508. But there's like how you count full time, 40 hours, and anyone less than that is like part time. Okay. So I think, but I know where the confusion is, because on the application form for the loan itself, it just said, what is your head count? Didn't matter if it was a full-time or a part-time. You just put total number of people who worked in your business, including the owners.
Gotcha.
In the forgiveness, it is asking for more specific information. And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't get forgiven. It just means it might be just a ratio if it's not a full-timer, right? So it's there's some examples in the instructions of the 3508 that can help maybe understand that. So my suggestion is, if you have payroll and if you have a payroll company that does it for you, ask for all the reports, get the details. When you do the 3508, you will have to fill in the worksheet with employee information, names and their last 4 digits of their social security number, and details and breakout of what was cash compensation, what was your vacation pay if you use that, what was your contribution to their health coverage insurance. Have all of that ready.
Great.
And your bankers will be working and knowing, because they did how many loans. So they are working to get the right decision tree factor, so to speak, all these criteria. So when you go to your banker and you provide them the information that they ask for, they will be able to answer those questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Cynthia. So we have gone well over our time. I do want to let you know that you are being expressed pounds of gratitude through our chat. There are so many people that you have helped today. Again, SBA Outreach and Marketing Specialist, Cynthia Yamasaki, thank you so much for your time. We will record this session and we will put it over on the BBB YouTube channel where you can access it. And again, trust-bbb.org for more information and resources. Have a great day, everyone.
Yes, aloha, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll just breathe and we'll get through this together. Stay healthy and safe. Aloha.